Dawn, but we got some breaking news here on the PFF NFL show. One of the best defensive players, one of the best players in the NFL, Myles Garrett, has officially requested a trade. I remember after the season was over, he said, I'm not going to be part of a rebuild. I will get out of here if it's going to be a rebuild. And looks like Cleveland might be rebuilding. And Myles Garrett says, like I told you, I'm not going to be here. So immediately, what's your reaction to one of the best players in the NFL and Myles Garrett requesting a trade?
This is now the biggest story of the offseason. And you have a player, arguably the best defensive player in football. Really, when you look at what he's done up to this point in Cleveland, one of the best defensive players of all time is what you're talking about. Just became, a trade target for who knows how many teams in the NFL. And we've talked about even several teams here already. When we've talked about Green Bay, and there's a couple other we're going to get to where you go, yeah, they needed pass rush. They need pass rush help. I mean, this isn't just pass rush help. This redefines what your entire defense is. I mean, honestly, even the Browns this year only winning, 4 games? You saw they were a threat any given week. And the first reason anyone will tell you is, oh, you have to find some way to block 95 or triple team him. He can single-handedly wreck a game. This isn't just a good defensive end. This isn't just some guy who, can come in and supplement. This is a cornerstone of any defense in the NFL, no matter where he goes. And it suddenly became the story of the offseason. Who is going to trade for the best pass rusher in the NFL? And I don't know the last time that we saw a player of this caliber. Obviously, we had Deshaun Watson through all his issues at quarterback, and we've had huge trades like Russell Wilson. But, aside from quarterbacks, when is the last time that we had a trade that could have been this big? What, maybe Randy Moss?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the type.
Luka Doncic 2 days ago.
Luka Doncic 2 days ago down in Dallas. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's something that I figured was on the table. And I think the Browns should welcome this. And I know Myles Garrett, he's a franchise. He's going to be a Browns Hall of Fame or Ring of Honor, whatever they do over there. It's just they need to reset this. They blew it on the Watson trade. I would trade. I've said it for weeks. I would trade Garrett. I would trade out of that second pick. Yeah. I would go full tilt. And I understand doing that, they may not win a game next season. I get it. But their roster is not ready to take on a rookie quarterback this season. I would not take a rookie quarterback with that second pick. And, okay, so maybe they think about an Abdul Carter or a Travis Hunter. I get that part. Me personally, I would trade down. I would just get as many assets as I possibly can, especially when you think about you could start a bidding war. Say the Jets, the Raiders, maybe some other teams about getting up to get Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward ahead of the Giants. Or even if you just get something ancillary for the Giants to move up one spot. We saw the Bears, wasn't it the Bears did it with Mitch Trubisky? Or the 49ers did it one time where teams will move up one spot. The Eagles with Jalen Carter did it. If you get a third or a fourth round pick out of the Giants and you still get one of your guys third, fine, but I wouldn't take a pick with that second pick. I would not do it.
And Travis Hunter would be great for the Browns, but if you trade back to the Giants at number 3 overall, you still get Abdul Carter.
Well, and I think you could still get Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
The Giants, whoever is going to trade up to that second pick is going to take a quarterback.
Yeah.
It's the idea of securing one of what we think right now is one of the only 2 viable quarbats, first-round quarterbacks.
We were at the Senior Bowl. They are the only 2 viable quarterbacks in the first round.
Yeah, it was tough to watch. So this I think is actually, for as much as it hurts, I think it's good for the Browns organization. Sorry,
yes.
Tyler. to reset everything. Because for Myles Garrett in his prime right now, you will get at least 2 first-round picks. And they need to completely reset this. They blew all their draft capital. They made the Deshaun Watson trade. They gave him the baseball contract. It spiraled completely out of control in a way that I don't even think we could have seen coming with how bad. I mean, they're picking 2nd overall, and they're only in, the 3rd year of that contract? It's unreal. And now he's torn his Achilles twice in a few months. So it was a disaster. And I think at this point, from Garrett's perspective, look, I get it. He said it. I don't want to go through a rebuild. I want to win. And the fact that they made the playoffs twice with him and he sees okay, this is what it's like. He wants to win a ring. And he's the type of guy who can go to one of several teams and potentially do that. Because, again, you could argue he's the best defensive player in football.
Yeah, and you can understand the frustration with him, right? I mean, they made the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. They get rid of Baker Mayfield very unceremoniously, and then they just never figured out a quarterback after that, right? Deshaun Watson has been an absolute disaster for that team as well. And you mentioned before, yes, it hurts, I'm sure, for Browns fans to see this when your greatest players of all time requesting a trade out of there. but it's almost like a necessary evil you have to do if you're Cleveland, right? You have to just completely tear this down to the studs and rebuild. Myles Garrett, 2021, highest graded edge in the league. 2022, highest graded edge in the league. 2023, highest graded edge in the league. This past year, second highest graded edge in the league. So he has been, by all accounts, like the best defensive player in football for the last few years as of right now. So you mentioned before, like maybe a first-round pick, maybe 2 first-round picks it will cost for Myles Garrett to end up getting him. Let's talk about some teams, Dalton, that might be interested in the Myles Garrett sweepstakes here. And some, if he wants to get traded to a contender, there are some contenders that need some edge help. You talk about the Washington Commanders that just made the NFC title game. They need edge help. The Detroit Lions, imagine a pairing with him and Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know how they would make it work cap-wise, but that would be a terrific pairing as well. The Atlanta Falcons have desperately needed edge help for like a half decade now. That would be incredible with the whole Michael Penix Jr. era starting there. And maybe if it's an Atlanta trade, maybe you can get Kirk Cousins out of the deal for Cleveland and just kind of have that at least for Cleveland at quarterback for the time being before they completely reset at quarterback as well. Maybe Seattle, right? Seattle could use some help at edge defender as well. So what team really stands out to you that is really should be going all in on Myles Garrett?
So the Atlanta one is difficult because you're still talking about taking on a guy with a $20 million cap hit next year, which actually when you look at what Garrett does, $20 million is a bargain as far as a cap hit. But those are the teams I look at, the combination of contention and salary cap space. I think the first one, surprisingly enough, or maybe not, is the one we've talked about for a while with this theory, the Detroit Lions. Because if you ever had Aiden Hutchinson and Myles Garrett on the same side of the field, that's almost not fair.
Aiden Hutchinson was the only edge in the NFL with a higher grade than Myles Garrett.
Right. So you have the 2 best edge players in the NFL on the same team. That's immediately where the Lions, these are teams that made the playoffs with lower first round picks. To me, if I'm the Lions, I don't have any reservations about handing them 2 first round picks and maybe something else to get this done. Because we're going to be in Super Bowl contention and we're going for it. And what a way to get kind of the morale back after a tough loss to Washington. And we're getting there in a minute. And losing both coordinators, right? All of a sudden, okay, what defensive coordinator wouldn't want to go with Aiden Hutchinson and Myles Garrett? They're bound to get a pretty good candidate who wants to work with that. I think about that. You mentioned the Commanders. Absolutely. When you talk about Myles Garrett, there's guys who are good players and there are guys that change your whole defense. The Commanders they did a nice job this year. They patched it together. Yeah. Obviously, Bobby Wagner as the captain of a ship with a bunch of kids and cast-off veterans getting enough done to get to the postseason, to get to the NFC title game. But Myles Garrett would give you a completely different dimension. You don't think Dan Quinn would love him after what he did with Micah Parsons and then all those years that he had in Seattle with all those great pass rushers. Garrett would turn that around. I look at the Chargers. We just talked about the Chargers needing edge help and having a bunch of cap space. Well, maybe you could still re-sign Khalil Mack even at a discount and then go, Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter. Boy, if I had Mack, if I had Myles Garrett, Thule behind him kind of rotating in, especially in run defense, boy, you're talking. I think there's so many teams right here that Minnesota's another one. We talk about, okay, what's a move that could put us over the top, and we have the cheap quarterback and we can afford it. There are so many options here, and it's just going to be about which team is going to give up the draft capital to really satisfy Cleveland in all of this.
Can I throw out a scorched earth scenario?
Absolutely.
What if Harry Roseman figures something out here? They could use some help at edge. I don't know what the cap space. I don't know how they would make it work cap wise in Philadelphia.
So they have $18 million right now, and I'm sure that's
one of the few positions where they could actually stand to improve a little bit at. And if you had Myles
because
Garrett,
the big thing is they whiffed on the Bryce Huff signing. That's the big one. They're kind of stuck with him for one more year.
Good. Yeah.
But you look at okay. I'm trying to find maybe some options here. If you were to,
how about if they do it, the Eagles adding 2 disgruntled superstars in Saquon Barkley and Myles Garrett in back-to-back years.
You can't ever count them out, right?
No.
And again, they're going to be picking 31st or 32nd, and they're going to be probably in that similar range in the late 20s.
It would cost probably 2 first-round picks.
Right. It's sure. I think it would cost anybody 2 first-round picks, unless like Tennessee were to turn around and say, we'll just give you the first pick for it. But I don't think that's happening. They're not in a position to do that. I think it would take for most teams at least probably, my guess, if I were taking a guess right now, like 2 firsts and a third.
Wow.
I think is what it would take. He's the best defensive player in football. He's worth that. And honestly, for any of those teams we just mentioned, for Detroit, for Washington, for the Chargers picking in the early 20s, a team. If we're going for the younger team that's kind of trying to get themselves into that sort of contention, and you have a higher draft pick, and you maybe Bears.
Ooh, that wouldn't cost 2. I don't think. Then it would probably be top 10 pick.
The good thing is that it's 10th overall this year.
Yeah.
And then these are all the scenarios. We're going to do this for weeks on end now with this. Is that so think about the Bears packaging something around the 10th pick. So maybe they go the 10th pick in 2 seconds or something like that. And then the Browns are picking 2 and 10. And then I have a case for them to go, okay, maybe you take Abdul Carter. And then at 10, I don't know, you get even Will Campbell or something like that, start fixing the trip. But those are the picks they need to make. That's the Browns part of this intrigues me because they need non-quarterback assets. If they draft a rookie quarterback at 2 overall, they will ruin him.
Yeah.
They'll just ruin him right off rip. They're not even good enough to support that. Just go let Jameis start for a year, Justin Fields if the Steelers don't want him, or there's been Kirk Cousins you mentioned with the Stefanski connection because Kevin Stefanski's got to be feeling like a lame duck now because it's hard to think that they're going to reset, say in 26 if it's Arch Manning or something like that, and keep Stefanski just as a matter of resetting the whole thing, right? I would if I was someone else, I would hire Stefanski in a heartbeat. He's a fantastic coach. It's just
he's 2-time coach of the year, yeah.
Right, he made the playoffs with Joe Flacco off the couch, right? I mean, I don't think this is an indictment of him. I just think Garrett knows where the Browns are going. The Browns likely know where the Browns are going. I would put them probably as the favorite to be the worst team in football next year.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if they trade Garrett. I mean, they just need to pick up draft assets and start getting towards the future and try to start winning by the time that Watson contract, by the time they can really get out from underneath that.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating what happens with Myles Garrett. It really is kind of like the Luka Doncic of the NFL.
This is now the number one story of the offseason. More than the draft, more than Sam Darnold, more than T. Higgins. It's this. This is what we need to watch for every single day. Is where is Myles Garrett going? Because he's the. You usually only say this about quarterbacks. He's the type of player that can change the power structure of the league.
Yeah.
If he goes to Detroit, we're sitting there going, oh, shoot, with him and Hutch. Or if he goes to Washington, we're like, oh, now they have Jaden Daniels and Myles Garrett. That's cool. Okay, that's a good start, right? Or if he goes to Philly, I don't even know how you'd ever score on them, like you mentioned. The Bears, it would make them legit. The Packers, who desperately need edge help, that would put them on a different level on defense. He is now the center of attention this offseason, and it's going to be just fascinating to watch the number of teams that could be in on this, the crazy offers that we're going to at least be rumored to hear about. I mean, and for a player of this caliber in his prime who doesn't need a scheme fit, it doesn't matter what defense he's in. He's just going to get out there and be the best player on the field. This is going to be now it was already going to be a fun offseason with as many teams, new coaches and quarterbacks and all that, but this is the number one story now.
I mean, he's been a superstar. He's been a superstar his entire life. I mean, he was one of the top recruits coming out of high school. I think he was the number 2 overall recruit coming out of high school. One of the best edges we've ever seen in PFF college history. And then now he's been the best defensive player in the NFL for a while now. So over the last 3 seasons, he has a 95.1 PFF grade, first in the NFL. 44 sacks, first in the NFL. 24.4% pass rush win rate, first in the NFL. And he's only 29 years old. There's still a few years of prime, maybe even more than a few years of prime Myles Garrett that we ever made.
And I look at so many teams. Denver, could they be in that mix? If you got, I know your guy Nick Bonito on one edge, but I mean, look, Myles Garrett. It's just that thing of you add Myles Garrett to any team in theory. And now I just wonder how quickly this gets done. We've got a little over a month to go, about 5-6 weeks to go to free agency. Does this get done before then? Or if it doesn't get done before then, do we start getting a big holdup in free agency about, okay, where is he going and who's got the cap space? Because this is going to happen quickly because you have to be able to afford a $20 million cap hit next year, and I believe the year after, and then it goes, I think there's one more year on the contract where it's heavy from there. It's kind of backloaded.
And if you're the Browns, you're going to want draft picks this year as well. You're not going to want to get a 2026 and 2027 first round pick.
Yeah, this is not something you wait until
post-draft.
No, this is like it, because if a team like the Bears comes calling you thinking about the 10th overall pick, you have to do that as soon as you can. So I think the Browns it would be stubborn of them at this point not to trade him, especially when he's requested it. They have to do it. This is now what he's given you, despite the fact that you'd have to trade Myles Garrett to get there. What he's given the Browns is an opportunity to hard reset, and they need a hard reset.
Yeah, and if you're Andrew Berry, word of advice: don't be like Nico Harrison. Call every team in the NFL. Right? Don't just take the first offer you get for a generational player.
Start a bidding war.
Yeah, please please, for the love of God, call every team. Don't just take the first offer you get because, oh boy, it's not the NBA show, but my God, what a horrible trade that was a few years ago. But yeah, Myles Garrett requesting a trade from the Cleveland Browns immediately. Maybe the top non-quarterback in the NFL, Dalton, is now on the block, and it's going to be a fascinating storyline. And he wants to go to a contender as well. This is not a guy where he wants to get paid more. He doesn't care where he goes. He wants to compete for a Super Bowl, and we'll see which contender trades for Myles Garrett, because there are a ton of contenders in the NFL that need some edge help and obviously could need the best edge rusher in the NFL.
What a shot of adrenaline after a weekend. After one weekend without football, and we come back on Monday, and that's what we get. That's just fantastic.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.